What's going on, guys? Magdallan here. I am absolutely hyped for 3.21. I think this is going to be an absolute slapper. I'm really looking forward to getting in there. But let's take some time here and go through these patch notes. I'm going to gloss over pretty quickly some of the stuff that was, gone over pretty much entirely on the live stream. We're not going to go through every single thing, but we are going to read through most of it. So, the Crucible Challenge League, they kind of already went through all of that. You'll learn about the ancient titans who once shaped the primordial surface of Rayclast. Their forges are scattered throughout Rayclast. When you find one, select one of your weapons and channel the power of the ancient titans to spawn a challenging encounter. The longer you channel, the more the molten monsters merge together to form more fearsome foes. You're in control of the difficulty and reward of these encounters. That sounds good to me. Let's go. And we're going to skip through the rest of that. That's just describing exactly what Chris Wilson said in the live stream. All right, 9 new Vol skills. You've got Absolution, Animate Weapon, Arctic Armor, Domination, Firestorm, Ice Shot, Lightning Arrow, Reap, and Rejuvenation Totem. I am most interested in Firestorm, I think. That could actually be fun to play. We'll see how that shapes up. 3 pairs of Atlas Gateways on the Atlas passive skill tree. That will definitely increase the variety of Atlas passive tree builds that we can make. So that'll be fun to explore when I revamp my farming strategy summary and review series that we did last week. I had a great time doing that, so we're planning on doing that again. And it looks like we've got some new skills. Snipe. Channel to charge up your bow, gaining stages. Release to trigger 1 supported bow skill for each stage gained. If there are no supported skills, but at least 1 stage was gained, the skill will fire its own arrow instead. Cannot be used by totems. That could be really neat. I wonder if the way that'll work out is you can have a bunch of different skills and just kind of blast them all at once. Could be pretty cool. And then we've got a new Dex Intelligence gem, Mana Forged Arrows. Supports bow attack skills, causing them to trigger when you spent an amount of total mana on other bow attacks based on the supported skill's mana cost. Supported skills deal more damage based on their mana cost. Cannot modify the skills of minions. That's another one that actually looks pretty interesting. And then a new intelligence gem, Prismatic Burst. Supports attacks, causing them to trigger the Prismatic Burst spell. Cannot support triggered attacks or attacks used by things other than you. Cannot modify the skills of minions. Prismatic Burst chooses an element at random and deals damage of that type in an area. Having higher strength makes it more likely to choose fire, Dex makes it more likely to choose cold, and intelligence makes it more likely to choose lightning. That could be really neat. And in fact, couldn't you kind of combine that with Mana Forged Arrows? We might have to explore that. And then we've got Momentum. Supports attack skills that aren't triggered. Using these skills will grant momentum, which is lost when you move. So kind of a standstill, aim and spray power-up type thing. That could be fun. And again, you could combine that with these other two, could you not? All right, 10 new unique items, 5 new div cards, and the following currencies now stacked to 20. Orb of Alchemy. Fantastic. Vol Orb, Chaos Orb, Tainted Chaos Orb, Eldritch Chaos Orb, and Veiled Chaos Orb. Very nice. I'm happy to see that. I think that'll be a good change. We'll see what happens if the Chaos Orb stack size increase actually affects the price of Divines or not. That remains to be seen, but generally speaking, bigger stack size means less clicking, which means less wrist strain for me, which means happier Magdallan. Items now persist in vendor shops for multiple levels so that you have a chance to buy them before they vanish. Okay, I don't care about that. Continue to incrementally improve art, sound effects, and environments. That's good. And then the League revamps. I'm not going to go through all of this. It seems like they have overall kind of decreased the frequency that you encounter breaches, it looks like, but they're going to make them more intense, so we'll see how that goes. I do want to go over, though, does it say anything about... Yep, here it is. Rusted Breach Scarabs cause an area to contain an additional breach. Polished, you get a breach and causes breaches in the area to contain an additional breach boss clasped hand. Ew. Gilded breach scarabs. You get still only one more breach. And you get the additional hand. And the area drops more splinters. The hand drops more splinters. And winged, you only get 2 more breaches. And then you get the above. And the hands drop double breach splinters. I don't know about that. Maybe that'll be better for actually getting currency, farming for currency with breach, but I mean, the scarabs were a big part of the way that you scaled up how many breaches you get in a map, so that seems kind of shitty, but we'll see. And then they messed around with the breach uniques. Let's see, the only one that I really care about is Zoph's Heart. Unique amulet no longer has cover enemies in ash. Instead, when they hit you, it now has nearby enemies are covered in ash. Okay, so that's a buff. So that's cool. I'll let you guys read the individual items. We'll worry about that more as the league gets closer. And then Abyss always contains a lich. Because the rate of encountering abyssal liches is unchanged, abyssal depths are now rarer than before. It's now possible for a Stygian Spire to spawn in the place of an Abyssal Trove at the end of the Abyss, which will drop all the jewels and other items you would normally receive, as well as a Stygian Vice. Very cool. Abyssal Depths can now only appear in level 78 or above areas. Abyssal Depths now always spawn at the 4th hole. Okay, so that's a buff. Ulaman, Sovereign of the Well, has had their life increased and can now use their cleave skill from further away. Okay, so they're making the mobs a little bit nastier. No longer Stygian Spires no longer gain a reduced damage taken buff upon using their skills. Instead, they now spawn with a reduced damage taken buff, which tapers off over 5 seconds. Okay. We've also taken this opportunity to revisit Abyss unique items and have made the following changes. And again, I'm going to kind of gloss over that a little bit. Let's look at the scarabs. They have been reviewed to account for these changes. Here's what they now provide. Rusted, cause an area to contain an abyss. Polished, you only get 1 abyss. Okay, and you get more monsters from the abyss. And then Gilded, you get 50% increased monsters. And Abysses, an area that do not lead to an Abyssal Depths to lead to a Stygian Spire. Okay. And then Winged, you get 2 Abysses, and it causes Abysses to have 50% increased monsters. And then you get the Spire thing. Okay, so basically the same thing they did with Breach. And then Atlas changes. This is where I start to get more interested. The following maps have been added back to the Atlas. Arid Lake, Armory, Barrows, Beach, very nice. Belfry, Cells, ooh. Chateau I like, Conservatory Core, Crystal Ore, Desert Springs, Dig, Excavation, Fields is a good map, Flooded Mine, Fungal Hollow, Geo, Jungle Valley is a good map, Lighthouse, Malformation, Marshes, Pit, Racecourse, Ramparts, Relic Chamber, Scriptorium, Siege, Stagnation, Tower, Tropical Island, hell yeah. Waste Pool and Wharf. Okay, that actually is going to be dope. The following maps have been removed. Academy, Acid Caverns, Ancient City, Ashen Wood, Bazaar, Bog, Burial Chambers, Cage, Carcass, Channel, Courthouse, Dark Forest, Desert. I like Desert. Estuary, Forking River, Gardens, Ghetto, Grave Trough, Graveyard, Haunted Mansion, Iceberg, Ivory Temple, Lava Lake, Lookout, Mausoleum, Mesa. Ooh, people are going to be upset about that. Peninsula, Sepulchre, Spider Forest, Spider Lair, Sunken City, and Villa. So, we're still going to be able to farm the temple, the Crimson Temple. And then we'll probably also be doing lots of Wharf, lots of Waste Pool, and lots of Tropical Island. That's actually pretty good. I'm happy with that. Map tiers and locations have been shuffled, though the pin location for maps has not changed. Most maps are now initially found at a different tier. Some of the map bosses you are required to defeat to upgrade your Pantheon have changed. Crafting recipes that were previously unlocked in maps that have been removed from the Atlas are now found within other maps. Some div cards have found new homes as a result of these Atlas changes. Arrogance of the Vol can now be found in the Vol Pyramid. Broken Promises can now be found in the Core. Immortal Resolve can now be found in the Crystal Ore. The Brawny Battle Mage, the Doctor, the Incantation, and the Witch can now be found in the Putrid Cloister, Sepulchre, Waste Pool, and Phantasmagoria maps. So we're going to be hunting for doctors in the sewer. That's going to be dope. Well, in the Waste Pool, but you know what I mean. The Conduit, the Dapper Prodigy, and the Sephiroth can now be found in the Residence map. The Wedding Gift can now be found in the Overgrown Ruin. So that's pretty cool. I'm interested in seeing if we can farm up some doctor cards out of the Waste Pool. Okay, endgame changes. Added a series of new profane modifiers that can roll on maps, logbooks, delve biomes, and heist contracts. These modifiers cause monsters to deal extra physical damage as chaos, and cause monsters to inflict withered for 2 seconds on hit. Ouch. The Eldritch Altar modifier that causes you to have reduced cooldown recovery rate per power charge has been replaced with one that causes you to have reduced critical strike multi per power charge. Okay. The Maven Invitation item quantity Atlas passive no longer each provide 3% increased quantity of items found in the Maven's Crucible. They now each provide final map boss, and each map has 8% increased chance to drop a Maven's Invitation, tier 14 plus. The number of Crescent Splinters dropped from Maven Invitations has been slightly increased to account for this change. The Harvest crafting option that applies an enchantment to a non-unique map, causing it to not consume sextant charges, has been replaced with an enchantment for non-unique maps that provides a 50% chance to not consume sextant uses. Oh, hate to see that strategy get trashed like that. I don't think that'll work basically at all anymore. Definitely not in solo self-found, right? Even if we could still kind of just get around it in trade. But I don't know, we'd have to ask some solo self-found guys how bad that is. Replica unique item rewards in Grand Heights no longer have a higher chance than normal to spawn with a high number of sockets and or links. Okay. Divination card and Voidborn Reliquary changes. Balance of Terror can no longer be obtained from the Voidborn Reliquary. It was enabled by mistake. Oops. The Iron Bard Divination card has been re-enabled and is now called the Rusted Bard. It now awards 4 Tainted Mythic Orbs. Okay. Alright, mastery changes. We have reviewed each mastery one by one and tried to come up with as many. Okay, so that's what he said in the live stream. The process was performed on approximately half of the masteries on the tree. We've also added new stun and recovery mastery types to fill gaps we felt were missing. Introduced a new recovery mastery, which replaces the life mastery in the vampirism, infused flesh, and hardy passive clusters. Introduced a new stun mastery, which replaces the attack mastery in the Goliath passive cluster. The life mastery in the unfaltering passive cluster, and is also found in the new Trial of the Faith, Conjured Barrier, and Perfectionist passive clusters. Okay, we'll have to see how those shape up, although those don't seem very exciting. We've compiled a list of the mastery types that have received changes, highlighting the new options below. The list is a spoilered section containing the masteries that have been removed for your reference. All right, accuracy mastery, 40% increased accuracy rating against uniques. The new one is gain accuracy rating equal to your intelligence. Okay, and then we got minion accuracy rating is equal to yours. Okay, that could be good. New 50% increased accuracy rating at close range. Okay, plus 500 accuracy rating, minus 2 accuracy per level. That's kind of weird. So armor, you now can get plus 1 armor per 2 strength. You can also get 1% to all maximum resistances if equipped helmet, body armor, gloves, and boots all have armor. Okay, that's kind of cool. 20% increased armor per second. You've been stationary up to a maximum of 100%. That's probably pretty good. And more armor from equipped boots and gloves. All right, armor and energy shield mastery. You can now get 2% chance per 5% missing energy shield to defend with 150% of armor. Recover 5% energy shield over 1 second when you take physical damage from an enemy hit. That could be good. 10% of armor also applies to chaos damage taken from hits. Okay, that one might be big. That might be huge for the Death's Oath build. We'll have to look into that. Increases and reductions, or well, I guess you're not taking chaos damage from hits really in the Death's Oath. So no, that won't affect that at all. I misspoke. Increase and reductions to armor also apply to energy shield recharge rate. That's the one that was there. The new one is 100% increased armor and energy shield from equipped body armor. If equipped gloves, helmet, and boots all have armor and energy shield. I like that. 10% of physical damage from hits taken as chaos damage. Now that one actually will benefit, potentially, the Death's Oath build. Alright, armor and evasion masteries. Defend with 120% of armor against projectile attacks. 5% more chance to evade melee attacks. That's nice. 80% increased stun and block recovery. Every 4 seconds regenerate life equal to 1% of armor and evasion rating over 1 second. 40% increased evasion rating if you've been hit recently. 40% increased armor if you haven't been hit recently. That could be neat. Immune to poison if equipped helmet has higher evasion rating than armor. Immune to bleeding if equipped helmet has higher armor than evasion rating. Okay. That actually seems really good. Alright, attack mastery. Non-vol strike skills target one additional nearby enemy. Okay. Gain adrenaline for 1 second when you change stance. Monsters cannot block your attacks. 5% increased attack speed per enemy in close range. Nearby enemies are intimidated while you have rage. That looks pretty good. Caster mastery. 25% more spell damage if you've been stunned while casting recently. 6% increased cast speed for each different non-instant spell you've cast recently. I'm not sure exactly what the use case is for that, but that seems like it could be pretty powerful. And then 25% chance to open nearby chests when you cast a spell. Okay. That could, there's a use case for that. I like that. That's, as far as I know, that's really the only like fun gimmick type thing inside the masteries that I've seen. I actually like that a lot. Alright, Chaos Mastery. Recover 1% of life per withered debuff on each enemy you kill. Okay, that could be good. Plus 1% max chaos res, always good. Deal 10% more chaos damage to enemies which have energy shield. Okay. 5% chance when you inflict withered to inflict up to 15 withered debuffs instead. Okay. That seems really strong. The chaos one looks very good. Claw Mastery, 25 life per enemy hit with main hand claw attacks, and 25 mana with offhand. Okay. Inherent attack speed bonus from dual wielding is doubled while wielding 2 claws. 60% increased damage with claws against enemies that are on low life. 10% leech is instant per equipped claw. 50% increased stealth if you've hit with a claw recently. That one also looks really strong. And Cold Mastery. New, let's see, 10% chance to inflict cold exposure on hit with cold damage. Very good. Enemies near targets you shatter have 20% chance to be covered in frost. Max cold res. Chills from your hits always reduce action speed by at least 10%. I don't know how good that is, because I thought most of the time when you're running cold, you're going to get more than 10%, but we'll see. Enemies permanently take 5% increased damage for each second they've been frozen by you, up to a maximum 50%. I don't know about that one. Alright, Dagger Mastery. What do we got? This one only has one new one, 50% increased projectile speed while wielding a dagger. That could be interesting. Elemental Masteries. So the new ones are 50% reduced effective exposure on you, Hits have 25% chance to treat enemy monster elemental resistance values as inverted. Okay. Critical strikes against you do not inherently inflict elemental ailments. Interesting. 3% chance for hits to deal 300% of physical damage as extra damage of a random element. I think that's actually really good. Is it not? I don't use a whole lot of builds that use Trinity, but wouldn't that be really good for that type of build? We'll have to see. Energy Shield Mastery. 10% less physical damage taken while on full Energy Shield. Could be good. Oops. 30% of chaos damage taken does not bypass Energy Shield. That could be real good. 100% increased Energy Shield from equipped helmet. Evasion, only one new one. 15% chance to suppress spell damage if equipped helmet, body armor, gloves, and boots all have evasion. Evasion and Energy Shield. 20% increased maximum Energy Shield if both equipped rings have evasion modifiers. 40% increased Energy Shield recharge rate if equipped amulet has an evasion modifier. Okay, that's the only one that has that particular line. 100% increased evasion rating if Energy Shield recharge has started in the past 2 seconds. 1% increased evasion rating per 5 intelligence. Dexterity provides no inherent bonus to evasion. And every 4 seconds, regenerate Energy Shield equal to 1% of evasion rating over 1 second. And then Fire Mastery. What we got? Burning enemies you kill have a 3% chance to explode, dealing 1/10 of their maximum life as fire damage. Very nice. 50% chance to refresh Ignite duration on critical strike. Regenerate 1 life per second for each 1% uncapped fire res. Critical strikes do not inherently ignite. 100% increased damage with hits against ignited enemies. Okay, but you know me, I'm a sucker for explode, and so any source, regardless of it only being 3% chance, that seems pretty good. That seems like it's something I'm going to want to try out. Flask Mastery. You got 25% chance to gain a flask charge when you deal a crit. Enemies you kill that are affected by elemental ailments grant 100% increased flask charges. Recover 4% life when you use a flask. All 3 of those look pretty good to me. Fortify Mastery. Recover 100 life for each fortification lost. Gain 20 fortification on melee kill against a rare or unique enemy. 2% reduced duration of ailments inflicted on you per fortification. And 4% increased stun and block recovery per fortification. Alright, now we've got Impale. 10% chance on hitting an enemy for all impales on that enemy to last for an additional hit. And then at the bottom here, 20% chance to hit to remove all impales from an enemy. Impales removed this way multiply their reflected damage for this hit by the number of hits they have left. Leech. Well, Leech, they changed a lot. 10% of Leech is instant. 40% increased armor and evasion rating while leeching. That's good. More damage with hits. 25% more damage with hits against enemies that cannot have life leeched from them. 25% of damage taken recouped as life if leech was removed by filling unreserved life recently. That could be big. That's pretty cool. 25% increased maximum total life, mana, and energy shield recovery per second from leech. That one's big too. Alright, Lightning Mastery. We've got 60% increased critical strike chance against enemies with lightning exposure. That's pretty good. And lightning damage of enemies hitting you while you're shocked is unlucky. That's pretty good too. And then Life Mastery. I know they highlighted this in the live stream, but 10% more max life if you have at least 6 life masteries allocated. 50% increased maximum life if there are no life modifiers on equipped body armor. You count as low life with while at 55% of maximum life or below. And you count as on full life while at 90% of max life or above. I could see some definite use cases for both of those. And skills cost life instead of 30% of mana cost. And then Link Masteries. Man, we don't care about that. Mana Masteries. Regenerate 5 mana per second. Okay. And 12% increased mana reservation efficiency of skills. That's a big one. And then Mind Mastery, we've got you gain 5% increased area of effect for each mine. And that's it for that. And Mark Masteries, marked enemies cannot regenerate life. Marked enemies cannot deal critical strikes. Your mark transfers to another enemy when marked enemy dies. 50% increased accuracy rating against marked enemies. So some fairly good changes there. And then Fizz Mastery, we've got 10% more maximum physical attack damage. Cannot be stunned by hits that deal only physical damage. Hits have 40% chance to ignore enemy monster physical damage reduction. And plus 6% to damage over time multiplier for bleeding per impale on enemy. Okay, that could be good. Poison Mastery, we've got enemies poisoned by you cannot deal critical strikes. And that's it for that. Protection Mastery. Previously resistance and ailment protection. 65% reduced effective withered on you. Your elemental resistances cannot be lowered by curses. That one seems pretty powerful. And damaging ailments cannot be inflicted on you while you already have one. Non-damaging ailments cannot be inflicted on you while you already have one. Okay. And then Recovery Mastery. This one's all new, so 3% chance to recover all life when you kill an enemy. That could be pretty crazy. Life recoup effects instead occur over 3 seconds. Every 3 seconds, consume a nearby corpse to recover 10% of life. Nearby enemies have 50% reduced life regeneration rate. Life recovery from regeneration is not applied every 4 seconds. Recover 1 life for every 0.1 life recovery per second from regeneration. And regenerate 50 life per second. And then Reservation Mastery. There's just one new one. Plus 1% to all maximum elemental resistances if you have reserved life and mana. So it seems like they're setting it up so that you could definitely get a couple more max all res from a few of these different ones. So that could be something that you could play around for sure. Spell suppression. You've got inflict fire, cold, and lightning exposure on enemies when you suppress their spell damage. Prevent plus 1% of suppressed spell damage per hit suppressed recently. Minus 2% chance to suppress spell damage per hit suppressed recently. Suppressed spell damage cannot inflict elemental ailments on you. You have phasing if you've suppressed spell damage recently. Plus 8% chance to suppress spell damage while phasing. And chance to suppress spell damage is lucky. Okay. So that might be good for situations where you just can't get it capped. And then Stun Mastery, 100% increased enemy stun threshold, 200% increased stun duration on enemies, 20% chance to gain an endurance charge when you stun an enemy with a melee hit, 50% critical strike multiplier against stunned enemies, hits against you cannot be critical strikes if you've been stunned recently, 25% chance to deal a stunning hit to nearby enemy monsters when you're stunned, gain adrenaline while stunned for 2 seconds per 100 milliseconds of stun duration. And then Trap Mastery, we've got 8% chance for traps to trigger an additional time. That could be really good. That's the only new one there. Two-Handed Mastery, ruthless hits intimidate enemies for 4 seconds. So other than that, I guess I didn't make a whole lot of changes there. And then lastly, Warcry Mastery. Warcries cannot exert travel skills. So that might be a small quality of life. And remove all damaging ailments when you Warcry, and Warcries have 10% chance to exert 3 additional attacks. So again, not like a huge change there, but that could be useful. And then there's a spoiler there for the ones that they removed, but I'll let you go through that yourself. Passive skill tree cluster changes. While looking at masteries, we noticed that there were some mechanics that didn't have enough passive tree support, so we decided to add more options and passive skill choices for those mechanics. We also wanted to grant more access to certain types of masteries and specific parts of the passive skill tree. For example, in order to allow more access to the attack mastery, we've added an attack cluster by the Templar and one between the Ranger and Shadow. That's a change I support. We wanted to create more access to other forms of recovery, such as regen and recoup, so we've added some new passive skill clusters. The addition of the stun mastery introduced some interesting mechanics that we want to provide more interaction with. We've introduced 3 new stun clusters to the passive tree and tweaked some existing ones to provide more ways to build upon stun other than stun and block recovery or reduced stun chance. Attack clusters. A new Righteous Fury cluster has been added to the southwest of the Templar starting position. Righteous Fury grants 10% chance to create consecrated ground on melee kill lasting 4 seconds and 40% increased melee damage with hits at close range. The powerful Bond cluster. The powerful Bond cluster has moved location on the passive tree to make space for the new Righteous Fury cluster. A new multi-shot cluster has been added to the northeast of the Ranger starting position. Multi-shot grants attacks fire an additional projectile. So that's good. The Careful Conservationist cluster has slightly moved location on the passive tree to make space for the new multi-shot cluster. So again, that seems pretty good. Then bow clusters. The Master Fletcher notable passive skill no longer provides 15% increased attack speed with bows, 20% increased accuracy rating with bows, or 20% increased projectile speed. It now has bows fire an additional arrow. The 3 small passive skills prior no longer each provide 10% increased damage with bows, 4% increased attack speed with bows, or 10% increased damage over time with bow skills. Instead, they now each provide 5% increased attack speed with bows. The entry small passive skill for the Master Fletcher cluster no longer provides 6% increased accuracy rating with bows. It now provides 12% increased damage with bows, previously 10%, and 12% increased damage over time with bow skills, previously 10%. So small buff there. And then cold clusters, a new Winter's Embrace and Glacial Cage cluster has been added to the northwest of the Witch's starting location. Winter's Embrace provides 60% increased freeze duration on enemies and 30% increased damage if you've shattered an enemy recently, while Glacial Cage provides enemies permanently take 1% increased damage for each second they've been chilled by you, up to a maximum of 10%. The small entry passive skill in the Season of Ice cluster now provides plus 4% to cold damage over time multiplier, previously 5. With the small passive skill prior to Season of Ice now providing 6% cold damage over time multiplier, previously 5. We've also added a third small passive skill to the Season of Ice cluster, which provides 20% increased effective chill. The Breath of Rime, a notable passive skill, no longer has 50% increased effective cold ailments, instead now has 50% increased duration of cold ailments. The 2 small passive skills in the Breath of Rime cluster that provide cold damage over time multiplier now have values of 5%, previously 6. The Fingers of Frost notable passive skill no longer provides 30% increased duration of cold ailments or 30% increased effective cold ailments. Instead, it now has enemies become chilled as they unfreeze, causing 30% reduced attack speed. The small passive skill in the Fingers of Frost cluster that provides 20% increased effective cold ailments now instead provides 20% increased effective chill. And then Fortify clusters. The Rampart notable passive skill no longer provides 40% increased damage with attack skills while you have at least 20 fortification, and instead now grants 30% increased armor and evasion rating while fortified. The 2 small passive skills in the Rampart cluster that provide 14 and 16% increased damage with attack skills while fortified, both now instead provide melee hits which stun have 10% chance to fortify. The Steadfast notable passive skill now provides plus 3 to maximum fortification, previously 4, and also now has regenerate 0.1% of life per second per fortification. And the entry small passive skill in the Steadfast cluster no longer provides fortifying hits, grant 30% increased fortification, and instead provides plus 1 to maximum fortification. Link clusters, we don't care about that. And then Mark clusters. A new Relentless Pursuit cluster has been added to the southwest of the Ranger starting location. Relentless Pursuit grants 10% increased attack speed if you've cast a mark spell recently, and 10% increased movement speed if you've cast a mark spell recently. That's pretty cool. A new Expert Hunter cluster has been added to the southeast of the Ranger starting location. Expert Hunter grants 20% increased effect of your marks. The Mark and the Prey cluster has been moved to the location of the Arcing Blows cluster. Mark the Prey no longer provides marked enemies grant 30% increased flask charges. Instead, it now provides marked enemy has 10% reduced accuracy rating. The 3 small passive skills prior have been replaced with 2 that each provide 20% increased damage with hits and ailments against marked enemies. The Arcing Blows cluster has moved location on the passive tree. It now resides above the Ghost Dance keystone. The 2 small passive skills prior to Marked for Death no longer provide 20% increased damage with hits and ailments against marked enemies or 10% increased effect of your marks. Instead, they now each provide marked enemy grants 20% increased flask charges to you. Flask charges. I don't know. It's a couple times I've said flack instead of flask. And then Poison cluster, the small passive skill in the Adder's Touch cluster that provides dagger critical strike multi and poison duration now provides 5% increased poison duration. The small passive skill in the Fatal Toxins cluster that provides poison chance and duration now provides 5% increased poison duration. And the 2 small passive skills in the Swift Venom cluster that provide attack speed and poison duration now provide 5% increased poison duration, previously 10. Okay, that seems a little bit underwhelming, but... And then recovery clusters. I don't think we'll go through all of this, but looks like they added another cluster, a couple of them. Yeah, all over the place they've added those. Stance cluster, stun avoidance clusters. They've done a lot with that, but we're gonna move on. Move on a little bit until I see something that actually interests me. Quality on an Intimidating Cry now provides 0 to 20% increased cooldown recovery rate. So that's the case for Intimidating Cry, Seismic Cry, Ancestral Cry, and General's Cry. We're also adjusting the values provided by quality. Okay. And here we are at Ascendancy changes. So for Sabo, definitely the Ascendancy most aligned with Traps and Mines. So this is just literally what he said on the live stream. So we'll go ahead and leave that to you to look at, as well as the Pathfinder. I thought both of those sounded pretty interesting, but I think we'll either go through all of that specifically once the tree is released and they've updated POB. But let's see, what do we've got for Ascendant? The Ascendant's Pathfinder and Saboteur Ascendancy passive skills have been changed, and as a result of the reworks to them, the Pathfinder notable passive skill no longer provides recover 4% life when you use a flask. Now provides 25% chance for flasks you use to not consume charges. It also now removes bleeding when you use a flask. Ooh. That seems like a huge nerf. Oops, accidental right click. The Saboteur notable passive skill no longer provides regenerate 2% life per second for each mine detonated recently up to 10% per second, or regenerate 2% of life per second for each trap triggered recently up to 10%. Instead, it now provides 15% increased cooldown recovery rate, and hits have 15% chance to deal 50% more area damage. Okay, I've never really played mines or traps. Alright, early game changes. New gems. We've added 3 new support gems in this patch. These support gems are all given out in Act 1 and supplement the early game of some archetypes, as well as introducing players to interesting Path of Exile mechanics early on. Such as gems triggering other gems in a relatively simple manner. To give another single target option for bows, we've also created a standalone version of the Snipe skill gem, which previously was only available through the unique helmet Asylum. Okay, I didn't actually realize that was already something that was in the game. Mana Forged Arrow support is now offered The Ranger for completing the Caged Brute and can be purchased from Nessa by the Shadow and Scion. Prismatic Burst is now purchasable from Nessa by the Templar, Shadow, Witch, and Scion upon completing Enemy at the Gate. The large chest on Twilight Strand now contains Prismatic Burst support for Scion. As the 3 combat focus unique jewels are able to interact with the new Prismatic Burst support, they now provide 10 to 15% increased elemental damage instead of 10 to 15% increased elemental damage with attack skills. Okay. The large chest on Twilight Strand now contains momentum support for Ranger. Previously Pierce. Okay, so you have to get your Pierce support somewhere else. Momentum support is now purchasable from Nessa by the Ranger and Scion for completing Enemy at the Gate. Momentum support is now offered to the Marauder, Templar, Duelist, and Shadow for completing a Mercy mission and can be purchased from Nessa. Pierce support is now offered to the Ranger for completing Mercy mission in addition to Shadow, Duelist, and Scion and can be purchased from Nessa. And Snipe is now offered to the Ranger for completing Breaking the Seal and can be purchased from Pitaris and Varja by the Duelist, Shadow, and Scion. Okay, so that seems like a good change. And here we are at the skill balance. A number of specific changes, primarily to skills acquired in the early game, have been made to even the playing field between leveling options. The majority of skills changed here have either been buffed or have received nerfs to early game power while compensating at higher levels. A few gems which were overperforming overall have had adjustments both to early and end game power. So melee splash support now has supported skills deal 40% less damage to surrounding targets at all gem levels, previously 50 at gem level 1 and 41% at gem level 20. At all gem levels, previously 50% at gem level 1 and 41%. Okay, so that's definitely one of the ones where they are hoping to make it more useful at the beginning. Awakened melee splash support now has support skills deal 39% less damage to surrounding targets at gem level 1 with a value of 37% at gem level 5, previously 38, so again that's kind of a small change. Blight now has a base duration of 2 seconds at all gem levels, previously 2.5. It now deals 3.9 base chaos damage per second at gem level 1, scaling up to 284 at gem level 20, so a little buff there. Explosive trap now causes 3 smaller explosions at gem level 1, so that's a nerf. And it scales back up to where it was at level 20. Shattering Steel now has 5 to 7 added attack fizz damage at gem level 1, so they nerfed that. And 123 to 185 to 113 to 1, so they just nerfed Shattering Steel. It also has projectiles deal up to 50% more damage with hits per steel shard consumed at the start of their movement, lowering the bonus as they travel further at gem level 1, scaling up to 110 at gem level 20. Okay, so maybe that one's not as bad. Maybe it's not that bad, I guess. But still looks like a nerf. And then Splitting Steel now has 70% effectiveness of added damage at gem level 1. Previously 100%. Okay, so that's a huge nerf. Scaling up to 210% at gem level 20, unchanged. It now has 1 to 2 added attack fizz damage at level 1, previously 2 to 3. Okay, so yep, they nerfed that one too. The base projectile speed of Spark has been reduced. It now fires 3 additional projectiles at gem level 1, previously 4, and 7 at gem level 20. So that's a nerf, for sure. I don't know how big of a deal that is at max level, but we'll have to see. And then the timer that prevents Spectral Throw from hitting the same target again after a hit has been reduced from 300 milliseconds to 225 milliseconds. This means it can hit the same target more often than before. Okay, so maybe that's a buff. I don't know if that's enough to make Spectral Throw a thing, but we'll see. Lightning Tendrils now deals 1 to 6 lightning damage at gem level 1, previously 1 to 4. Scaling up to 75 to 1420 at gem level 20, previously 55 to 1052. So that's a buff. Stronger Pulses no longer deal 200% more damage with hits. Instead, Stronger Pulses always critically strike. Now releases a Stronger Pulse every 3 pulses, previously 4. So that might just be a buff all around for that one. Explosive Concoction now consumes 1 charge per projectile fired from 1 flask of each valid type, if possible, instead of 3 charges from 1 flask of each type. It now deals 37 to 57 added cold damage if charges were consumed from a Sapphire Flask at gem level 1, previously 29 to 43, so that's a buff. Scaling up to 389 to 589 at gem level 20, previously 301 to 451. So definitely a buff there. It now deals 8 to 87 added lightning damage if charges were consumed from a Topaz Flask, previously 6 to 66, so another buff there. Scaling up to 88 to 903 at level 20, previously 63 to 690. So Explosive Concoction looks like it definitely, that's going to be a lot better. Poisonous Concoction now consumes 1 charge per projectile fired from 1 life flask, if possible, instead of 2 charges from 1 life flask. It now provides added chaos damage equal to 3% of flask recovery amount if charges were consumed from a life flask at gem level 1, unchanged. Scaling up to 11% at gem level 20, previously 9%. Okay, so that's a buff. Hell yeah. I actually played Poisonous Concoction at league start last league, and so it looks like it should be just even better now. I had a pretty good time with that. I did an occultist variant, and that's it. So I mean, basically they didn't really change a whole lot at all. A few like minor nerfs, and I mean Spark might be pretty heavily affected by that change to its projectile speed, but otherwise okay. Onslaught support. In an effort to make a wider variety of builds competitive for leveling, we initially considered broadening the use case for Onslaught support in order to allow more builds to use it. This would result in Onslaught becoming a mandatory link for almost every build to level faster. This would still mean that the few remaining builds that could not make use of Onslaught support would be at a speed disadvantage in the early game. This eventually led us to the conclusion that the removal of the support gem and the addition of a number of new support gems to support more interesting early playstyles was the correct route to try to broaden the playing field. This does lower the early game movement speed potential of some builds, placing more reliance on gear and passive tree choices to invest into movement speed. Yikes. Onslaught support has been removed. A new momentum support gem has been added in its place. So you're going to take away something that gives you a bunch of movement speed and replace it with something that gives you some kind of a thing that stacks when you stand still. I don't get it. Unless momentum gives you movement speed. Items that previously granted Onslaught support, such as the Forbidden Shaco and Hungry Loop unique items, now instead grant momentum support. Oh. Okay, well, that's kind of the way it always is with GGG. They giveth, they taketh away. So it looks like you might do a little bit more damage, and you might be able to play a few more skills leveling than you would have before, but I mean, Onslaught's kind of a big deal for most of the leveling builds that I've played, so that actually sucks quite a bit. And alright, next section, attack and bow-based leveling. In order to better support early attack and bow-based leveling, faster attack support and various mark skills have had their level lowered, adjusting their values to be appropriate for their new levels. These gems still scale to the same or very similar values in the end game. Faster attack support now has a level requirement of 8, so it used to be 18, and scales like other support gems that start with a level requirement of 8. So let's just see here. Attack speed at gem level 1, okay, up to 44%, so that one's unchanged at level 20, you just get it earlier, and okay, fine. Now offered the Marauder, Duelist, Ranger, Shadow, and Scion for completing the Caged Brute. Okay. Okay, faster attacks. It's no longer offered to Marauder Duelist Ranger, blah, 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 for completing Sharp and Cruel, and can no longer be purchased from Yena by the Templar. As a result of these changes, the Ornament of the East Unique Claw now has Socketed Gems are supported by level 15 faster attacks instead of level 10. Okay. And then Sniper's Mark now has a level requirement of 4 at Gem level 1, so that one came way down. It used to be 24. And it scales like others with the same requirement. 10% increased damage from projectile hits at level 1. Up to 35%, unchanged at level 20. Okay, so again, that one's fine once you get it leveled up. Sniper's Mark, okay, and then same thing about how it's offered differently. Assassin's Mark now has a level requirement of 16, previously 24. It's offered to the Shadow for Intruders in Black. Scales like other skill gems. Okay, but they didn't give us the numbers for that, so we'll just have to see how that goes. Same deal with Warlord's Mark, and Poacher's Mark now has a level requirement of 16, previously 24. Now adds 3 to 4 fizz damage to hits against cursed enemies at level 1, previously 6 to 9. Up to 30 to 45 at gem level 20, which is again unchanged. Okay, so that's mostly good, I guess. Although they might be a little bit less powerful for the first few levels, but you'll get through there pretty quick. Alright, Scepters. As Scepters are meant to be more caster-oriented than their one-handed mace counterparts, it didn't make sense that many early game Scepters, Scepter bases had significantly faster attack speed than one-handed maces. These Scepter bases have had their base attack speed values lowered and physical damage values buffed to compensate. I'm not going to read all of that, but somebody who knows more about that specific playstyle will have to let us know if this is a bad change or a good change. Wand and vendor recipe changes. The vendor recipe granting flat elemental damage to spells no longer exists. Weapons created using this recipe in the first few acts were powerful enough sources of damage to not need to be replaced until players reached even the final few acts of the campaign, which is not ideal. Players should be actively considering weapon replacements as they progress through the leveling process, an aspect of leveling which was undercut by the existence of the vendor recipe. I think some people are going to be mad about that. We've also changed the implicit modifiers of many wands. These changed wands now have a new implicit which grants specific flat elemental damage to spells and attacks. This means that it will still be feasible, though these bases, through these bases, as well as explicit modifiers to obtain flat elemental damage early on, while adding some more consistent early flat damage for wand attacks to take advantage of. There are also endgame variants of these base types which add more variety to wand bases. The following wands have received new implicit modifiers. Okay, and then again, I'm not going to read all of these, but that seems, again, like a change that it is probably a bigger nerf than what they're making it out to be here. But I'm not a huge number cruncher guy, and so I can't say for sure, but I this particular wand and vendor recipe thing, that makes me think that some folks are going to be pretty upset, but we'll see what happens. And some unique wands are going to be found on new base types. Okay. Let's see here. Apep's Rage. Obliteration is now an imbued wand. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll have to see about that. Okay, Arcane Surge. In an effort to have cast speed still available early for casters who want to invest into it in their support links, Arcane Surge now grants cast speed instead of more spell damage. Changes to Hierophant and Ascendant, as well as minor changes to Arcane Surge related passives on the tree have been made to account for this. So it no longer causes Arcane Surge to grant more spell damage. Instead, it now causes Arcane Surge to grant 10% increased cast speed at gem level 1, scaling up to 20% at gem level 20. Supported skills also now deal 10% more spell damage while you have Arcane Surge at gem level 1, up to 25% at gem level 20, previously 19. Okay, Arcane Surge. In an effort to have cast speed still available early for casters who want to invest into it in their support links, Arcane Surge now grants cast speed instead of more spell damage. changes to Hierophant and Ascendant, as well as minor changes to Arcane Surge. Related passives on the tree have been made to account for this. Yeah, again, I feel like that's probably just a nerf. And we'll kind of gloss over the rest of that. I assume some people are not going to like that, but we'll just kind of see how that plays out. Miscellaneous player balance. Stunning enemies has become too trivial with the amount of hit damage the majority of players regularly deal. To combat this, we've made it harder to stun enemies with hits for almost all skills. However, since melee relies on stun more than other archetypes for survivability, the ability for melee attacks to stun enemies has remained untouched. Okay. Molten Shell currently outperforms other guard skills without much investment. We've reduced the amount of damage the buff provided by Molten Shell can take to bring this skill more in line with other guard skills. 10% of your armor up to a maximum of 5,000 at gem level. At all gem levels, previously 20% up to a maximum of 10,000. Okay, so they nerfed the shit out of it. And I know that Molten Shell is a big part of a lot of builds, but I haven't actually been using it as much in recent leagues, and so that doesn't affect me a whole lot. But again, I feel like that's going to be a thing that's not a trivial buff, or pardon me, a trivial nerf. Vol Molten Shell now has buff can take damage equal to 20% of your armor up to a maximum of 10,000 at all gem levels, previously 30% of your armor up to 30,000. So yeah, that's a pretty good size nerf there. Animated weapons no longer randomly pause when moving or attacking. As a result of this change, we've adjusted the attack speed and damage provided by the animate weapon gem. This should be a net neutral change in terms of damage dealt, but result in more consistent damage and clearing. Okay. Any trigger skills on items that come from a skill gem, such as Rain of Arrows from Lionized Paws, now share the same cooldown group. So using the gem version of the skill should put the triggered version on cooldown or vice versa. So that's a nerf. Simplified projectiles. Projectile returning. Previously, some effects that cause projectiles to return specified they only did so at the end of their flight, others only from a final target, and a few from either case. Now all effects that cause projectiles to return do so in any case that they can. Okay. Projectiles which explode or otherwise destroy themselves only when they cannot move further, such as Fireball, which return will now consistently not do so until after they have returned, just like they don't do so before piercing, forking, or chaining if they have these behaviors. If they have those behaviors. Previously, this was inconsistent. As a general rule, if a projectile wouldn't do something when it pierces or chains from an enemy and continues on, it also won't do that when it hits an enemy and returns from them. So this seems kind of just like a few nerfs to Nimbus. Projectiles from skills which force them to explode or otherwise destroy the projectile before checking for other behaviors, such as the concoction skills, will now consistently prevent returning, just like this prevents other projectile behaviors. Projectiles which initially fire at a specific location rather than in a direction, such as Caustic Arrow, now ignore this when returning, so they will continue past you until they hit something. Vol strike skills can no longer be supported by Ancestral Call and are no longer affected by stats that cause strike skills to target additional enemies. Okay, so that's not good. That's a nerf there for sure. Power charges now provide 50% increased critical strike chance per power charge for players and minions, previously 40%. Okay, so that's a buff to power charge stacking. The Corruption Notable passive skill provided too high of a damage boost than is reasonable for a single notable. We've changed this so it now provides 20% increased effective withered. Okay. So that is the first like legitimate actual nerf to the Death's Oath build, and I don't have to read the rest of these patch notes to tell you they probably didn't buff Death's Oath, and so that sucks. Phantasmal Decoy, Totem, Explode on Death can now be affected by the player stats such as modifiers to damage and area of effect. Okay. A previous change in 3.19 doubled the values of the aura from the Shaper Seed unique. but this was done incorrectly and only changed the displayed values on the item, not the actual values granted. This has been fixed. The values of life and mana regeneration granted to allies will always match what is displayed on the item. Okay, so they just fixed that. Totems spawned by players are now killed upon player death. I don't know what effect that has. The modifier on the Torchoke Step unique boots that cause totems to reflect 100% of their maximum life as fire damage to nearby enemies now has a greater radius. Okay. Withering Step is now able to be supported by Spell Totem. Okay. Okay, and then we're on to item balance. The bow attacks fire an additional arrow. Synthesis implicit modifier can no longer roll on bows and quivers. Oh, shit. Oh, no. That's huge. That's a big yikes. Why would they do that? Oh, man. So now, and there's not going to be enough time for me to try and grab up any of those for standard, so I'll have the few bows that I have, and that's it, I guess. That's a shitty change. The Elders, Hunters, Veiled, and Crafted belt modifier that provides a chance for flasks you use to not consume charges can no longer roll. Okay. Increased the level at which Surveyor's compasses can appear as they were dropping well before, blah, blah, blah. You can no longer create books of regression. Existing unused books of regression will be destroyed when 3.21 is deployed. Okay, again, this whole chunk here seems like they could have just not done that. Monster balance. The unique item drop chance for Katarina, Master of Undeath, has been rebalanced. The powerful minions monster modifier has been split into two different modifiers. Powerful minions, which buffs the life and damage of minions, and constantly revives minions, which, well, constantly revives minions, okay. Kitava's heralds in the Lava Lake boss arena now spawn as magic instead of rare. The rare monster modifier that triggers purple crystals when the monster is hit now has larger crystals, and the crystals have a slightly longer delay before exploding after the monster dies. The crystals now deal chaos damage instead of elemental damage and have had their damage lowered. Curses applied by necromancers are no longer removed upon their death. Okay. I don't care about Ruthless, so we're going to skip that. Kirak League mods available during 3.21. Okay, let's see here. Fortune Favors the Brave for 3C. Abyss for 2C. Essence for 3C. Okay, Ambush. That's nice. Metamorph at 5C. Heist at 6 Chaos Orbs. Expedition at 10C. And Harvest. Area contains the Sacred Grove for 12C. We're going to have to see what happens with that. I don't know if that is going to be enough to sort of change the trajectory of Chaos Orb deflation that's been going on over the last couple leagues. I'm guessing people are not going to be happy about this, although I'm not sure how big of a deal having Harvest on there at 12C is going to be. We'll just have to see. Because I think, given that we've got kind of a hybrid crafting league going on, maybe there is going to be a higher demand for Harvest, just because more people are going to be wanting to craft up their weapons before they, get in there and mess around with the Crucible stuff, but we'll have to see. Then we've got UI changes, added an option to hide your account's email address on the Path of Exile login screen. Okay. Added an option to disable tutorials for characters you access. Very nice. And then the oil thing where they're going to show it so that colorblind folks can see what's going on. Both Lily Roth and Siosa's shop tabs are now color coded. Okay. Added the ability to release captured beasts through the bestiary panel, so we already kind of knew about that stuff. Added and this is item filter, added a new has implicit mod condition for item filters, which can be used to filter by items that have at least one implicit modifier. Okay. That seems like a big change. All right, and then we've got a bunch of bug fixes, which I'm not going to read all of those, but there is a lot of them. And then that's it. That's what we got. And then we've got a pretty good comment here for the first comment. Diablo 4 refunded. People are ready. I gotta say, generally, I think these are pretty good patch notes. There aren't any Omega nerfs or builds that are being completely destroyed that I can identify, at least ones that I play regularly. And so that's good. The only real change that I'm legitimately a little bit pissed off about is the removal of the bow attacks fire and additional arrow synthesis implicit. That kind of sucks a lot. And I'll be interested to see what other content creators have to say about that. But that is going to do it for me for this patch notes video. Hopefully you found it at least marginally interesting to listen to me struggle to read through all this stuff. And I will see you guys in the next video. I appreciate you.